Hey guys, what's going on? Most of you probably know about the dystopian classic 1984, where a totalitarian government uses thought police and language manipulation to control the people. And you probably know about the other dystopian classic, Brave New World, where the government uses recreational drugs and an avalanche of entertainment to control the people. But you probably haven't heard of this third dystopian classic, The Iron Heel by Jack London. If this book had been written today, it would be called Late Stage Capitalism. That's what it's about. Jack London was incredibly prophetic in how he saw capitalism evolving to this point where most of the wealth is in this small percentage of the people, and they use that power to infiltrate every aspect of society to the point where they control the courts, they control the police, they control the press, so that they're not seen as greedy opportunists, but instead protectors of the people, a shield against chaos and anarchy. So they essentially get to the point of 1984's government without ever being in the government. The answer to this is, of course, socialism. Jack London was apparently a huge proponent of it. When he was young, they called him Kid Communism or something like that. The main character is one of the leaders of the revolution, and it's told through a fictional journal of his wife, which details a lot of his inspirational speeches, a lot of his calling out of the injustices in the courts and the social systems, and his questioning of the upper class and how they really can have no empathy to allow these inhumane things to continue, not only continue, but to benefit them. He rallies the people to band together. Of course, there's a lot of obstacles here, one of them being the stranglehold that the upper class has on society, others being that people have no other choice. You know, they have to live somewhere, they have to work somewhere, and when one group of people controls all of the options, then you don't really have an option. And this book has unfortunately been used by a lot of radical groups as a textbook. White supremacists and neo-Nazis have both read it to try and start their own revolutions, so it gives you a hint about where it eventually goes. One takeaway from this book for me was that there has always been and will always be a class struggle, and it's not necessarily on us to try and solve that, but just to maintain the balance. So of course in this book it was not balanced, and balance had to be found in a way that has been the historical way that people have restored the class balance ever since some form of capitalism has ever existed, which is something that I think most ethical people would like to avoid, even though it has happened again and again in history. I will say this is not a good piece of fiction. The narrative was kind of clunky, I couldn't really follow the thread, but it is a really good piece of propaganda. And I say that with no negative connotation, even though that word has picked up a lot of that, probably because it's generally preceded by the word Nazi. But actually that brings me to my favorite aspect of this book, which is just one term that he uses, phrase slaves. I think he uses it in terms of the masses, how they became phrase slaves because the upper class was so good at manipulating language and the press that all they had to do was insert a couple choice words into a news article and they would have people think a very specific way about it. And I've always been against the manipulation of language or the changing of language, but definitely recently terms have been changing more commonly than before. And thanks to 1984, I'm very hesitant to have my language altered. But I understand now, because words carry such heavy connotation with them that sometimes you kind of have to start over. Because we become phrase slaves. We hear a certain word or a certain phrase, and there's this huge backlog of preconceived notions before we even understand what context the word is being used in. And one of these terms that I think has accumulated a lot of negative connotation recently is cancel culture. And I bring that up because it is relevant to the book. Obviously it's talking about socialism, and that is one of the tools you have as an individual in a larger majority, is that you have your one vote. Every dollar you spend is a vote. Every second of attention you give something is a vote. So if we want to do a little updating and call it social voting instead, it's a very democratic idea. But certainly, myself included, I hear that term and already I've preloaded every instance of it to ever occur, especially the ones that I disagreed with or thought were a bit egregious. and the term has lost all potential for positive effect. Because if I'm allowed to put my tinfoil hat on, I would say that cancel culture is a massive threat to the upper class. That is a way that people can gather and collectively take down something that they think is immoral or wrong. So it would be in their best interest to destroy that phrase as quickly as possible, which I'm not saying there's any interference. I have a hard time thinking that there's a bunch of Mr. Burns sitting around a round table and thinking, how can we manipulate, how can we destroy the phrase cancel culture? Because I think people in general did a good job of destroying it by themselves. But social voting, for me at least, offers me something that I can do to feel good about, to know that I am trying to maintain balance as best as I can. By not buying from a company that I think is immoral, and by not watching something that I think is degrading to humans in general. Now, of course, this all relies upon an authentic and truthful media, which sometimes we can't rely upon, but that's a whole nother video. Like I said, Iron Heel, not a great piece of fiction. It's not going to keep you on the edge of your seat, but read it for the fact that it was written in 1908 and how well Jack London was able to predict the future of capitalism. I was impressed by that alone. But I read another book, although I have no way to segue because these two books are totally different. This one's The Manticore by Robertson Davies. I read Fifth Business a while ago, absolutely loved it. This is the sequel, another book in his Deptford trilogy, which is connected, but they are all standalone books. Although it's nice because he offers a lot of Easter eggs for those who have read the first one in this series. It's the same theme where he's evaluating a character and highlighting certain aspects of their past so that you can understand who they are today. Our main character was a character in the first one. They're dealing with the unfortunate death of their father and having a hard time of it. So he goes to Geneva, I think, to undergo therapy. And it's heavy-duty therapy. He's there for a number of years, working like full days trying to recollect things that happened in his childhood and dreams that he had and how he felt about them and the people that he's met and learned from throughout his life. And the therapist is giving him this truly holistic approach to trying to solve this problem, which really stands out in stark contrast to some of the sorry excuses that I have for therapy, which is like self-help videos on YouTube, which oftentimes just offer you this quick fix, easily digestible quote that doesn't really stand up to any kind of criticism. Something broad, like don't let other people's morals get in your way, where it sounds good, but of course, one, falls victim to the fallacy of extremes, and two, is just kind of untrue because you need other people's morals to help build your own, but sometimes other people's morals do get in the way because people are different. Anyways, it just proves to me that you really need to sit down and have a thick chunk of introspection in order to get anywhere with self-improvement. So this book follows this guy's journey in therapy, and it is jam-packed with a lot of really interesting and really applicable messages. I felt like I was going through therapy as well. So, free therapy from The Manticore by Robertson Davies. That's a big plus. They used a lot of Carl Jung's teachings, his 4 different personality types, which is thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. And I definitely know where I lie in that. And I could draw a lot of conclusions based on that because luckily this character was also in that camp. And I felt like I connected with the character on a lot of levels in terms of his habit of overthinking and being overly rational and all of the downfalls that can cause in a life. Very early in the book, there's a quote, something like, when you're in your early 30s, you must make a turn or hit a brick wall. So that got my attention, and by the end, I think I know what they're talking about, because there is definitely a shift that needs to happen mentally, priorities, day to day, that it can be kind of scary to look at. And that is the title of this book, The Manticore, is symbolic of some aspect of you that is undeveloped. A manticore is the head of a human, the body of a lion, and the tail of a scorpion or something. It's got a barbed tail, so it's dangerous. And when you're trying to analyze this underdeveloped part of you, it hurts. It's scary, or it causes anxiety or stress, which means it often remains undeveloped and unanalyzed because you don't want to look at it, you don't want to think about it. So the book is kind of about, I don't want to say slaying that Manticore because you're not trying to destroy a part of you, but taming that Manticore. You're trying to figure out why it was undeveloped, and then you're trying to develop it in a phase of your life where it should already be developed. And again, all I can say is that I really related to it. I can only imagine that everyone has a Manticore. Maybe I'm wrong. But this book was a journey. It was a journey of self-discovery, honestly. And I know that's kind of cliche, you read that on the back of a book, but it was. And furthermore, it was entertaining. Robertson Davies is a great storyteller. There was a narrative in this book that I was compelled with, and I laughed out loud a few times. I lived through this book, I laughed at this book, and I love this book. Hit the holy trifecta, put it on the wall. Better than the first book, I would say, which is unheard of, that the sequel to a book is better than the original. Definitely read this book if you enjoy introspection like I do. Really eye-opening in a lot of ways. And that's what I got for you guys. So as always, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.